Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Joseph Ho in Whitehorse. New police patrols are hitting the streets in Montreal. The goal is to help Inuit living there feel comfortable about reporting crime. The 2-week pilot project will pair 8 officers from Nunavut's police force with 8 from Montreal's. The Nunavut police chief says there has been rising gang activity and intimidation of Inuit down south. He points to 2 incidents since May that involved drug trafficking into Akulavik and Saluit.
These police operations destabilize these criminals who have since retaliated in Montreal. For example, they intimidate, threaten, and attack Inuit people so that they remain silent and they do not identify them.
The initiative also has the blessing of the Kativik regional government.
We are also here to support Nunavut Inuit. So it is very important for us to collaborate in this pilot project so that they can sense that we as regional organization in Nunavut, we also hear their concerns even though they're in the south.
The City of Montreal and its police service say they're planning to visit Nunavut. They say they want to learn how to better serve Inuit communities in the south. The law firm handling the Indian boarding homes class action says they expect about 700 claims from the Northwest Territories. Last December, the federal court approved a settlement between Canada and Indigenous people who were placed in the program. The claims process opened a month ago. Nadir Hashmi tells us more.
Originally from Nunavut, Jerry Sharp was enrolled in the Indian Boarding Homes program. She says she attended Sir John Franklin High School and stayed in 3 private homes. One of the homes housed 11 other children.
My first day there, when we all sat down to supper, my reaction was, is there a birthday or something that there's so many children? And that's when I found out that there were 11 others.
Sharp says children in the Indian Boarding Homes program face abuse similar to residential schools.
Well, I don't want to go into too much detail, but there were instances where there was actions that allowed me to put forward and be part of this class action lawsuit.
The Toronto firm handling the class action since 2018 says the Government of Canada ran this program from the 1950s to the 1990s. Away from families, the government placed Indigenous children in private homes to attend school. The firm said there were many parents who did not treat the children well.
But then there were also parents, frankly, who were predators. And there are instances of Indigenous children reporting to the Indian officer who would place them with the family, telling the government, I am being sexually assaulted.
Lennox says there are documents and memos corroborating the government's inaction at the time. In 2018, the class action started with 4 plaintiffs and they're expecting more than 33,000 claimants. Lennox says there are 2 categories of compensation.
It starts at $10,000 simply for proving that you were in the program. That is compensation for being cut off from your family and your culture. It does go up from there if you suffered abuse or neglect, mistreatment, and it can go up to $200,000.
Lennox says it takes 6 to 8 months to process each claim. Jerry Sharp says she found the claim process easier than other similar class actions, and she suggests other claimants contact the lawyer assigned by Canada to guide them. Claim members have until February 2027 to file their claim. Nadir Hashmi, CBC News, Yellowknife.
In the Yukon, the Premier says crime will not be tolerated. Speaking to reporters today, he outlined several new programs to tackle safety in downtown Whitehorse. Cheryl Kawaja brings us the latest.
Yukon Premier Ranj Pillay says downtown Whitehorse is at a tipping point.
People feel unsafe. That's where we are right now. And too many people who are trying to get help are prevented from doing so.
At a press conference today with the Justice Minister, he updated the downtown safety plan, including a new program for businesses to upgrade their infrastructure for safety.
We know that there's been a noted rise in property crimes recently, including vandalism, break-and-enter and shoplifting offences.
With a tough on crime message, the Premier also talked about harm reduction. He says it's not just for those experiencing substance abuse.
We're speaking about the broader harms to the entire community, our whole community. We cannot focus on harm reduction for only one specific group of the population. While people who use substances are the victims of a disease, that does not give them free rein to cause harm.
Other initiatives today include a new supportive housing program right across from the downtown shelter that he says will have a high level of security. Also, the warming shelter at the Legislative Building will return this year. And pending legislative approval, keep in mind it is a minority government situation here, they announced new funding for 2 additional RCMP officers and 1 investigator.
Any individual, whether they're dealing with an addiction or for any other reason, that are consistently committing acts of crime have to pay for that behavior.
Reacting to the news, the director of the Safe at Home program says she's pleased to see so many organizations working together for safety, but she adds it's important not to criminalize poverty.
I would also like to be able to say, here are the forums that you can come to have your voice heard. And that's a piece that I haven't, that didn't come out for me, is where can people who are experiencing homelessness, experiencing disproportionate impacts of unsafe shelter spaces, like where do they go to voice their concerns in a safe space, and not in a tokenistic way that we've checked a box, but that their input and solutions will be honored.
The legislature resumes next week here in the Yukon, and so we will hear more about these initiatives in the weeks to come. Cheryl Kawaja, CBC News, Whitehorse.
It's been a long road to recovery for Katlo-Deche First Nation members who lost their homes in last year's devastating wildfire. But now, some of them are finally moving into new houses and starting to rebuild their lives. Carla Ulrich has that story.
I just don't know how to thank them, each and every one of them, for doing something this big for me, you know.
Louis Tambour and his dog Fluffy lived in a Hay River motel room from May 2023 until last month. He lost his home in the wildfire that ripped through the reserve on Mother's Day last year. Tambour moved into his new home in early August. He says it's been an adjustment, but he's very grateful.
Still getting used to it. A few things, you know, like a stove, and I have to phone different people to show me how to operate it, you know. Cook my first meal with it in the oven anyway. I'm really thankful for this place.
Tambour says his next plan is to rebuild his sheds that burned in the fire. April Martel is the Katlo-Deche First Nation chief. She says it was a challenging year, organizing and replacing the 18 houses that burned down, but says it feels great to finally have all the fire victims back in homes.
So excited. There was just tears that day, and happy tears from everyone. So I'm super happy, and council and ourselves and all the contractors, the pathfinders, everyone, they worked so hard.
Martel says they are now focused on completing all the house renovations for members that were displaced in the flood 2 years ago. She is looking forward to everyone finally being back in their homes so they can focus on healing. Carla Ulrich, CBC News, Fort Smith.
Collège Nordique has received official accreditation from the Northwest Territories government. That makes the school a post-secondary institution. It's now one of several official minority language institutions in Canada. Collège Nordique offers professional, language, and continuing education courses. Until now, it was a nonprofit organization that could not issue transcripts or diplomas. Angelique Ruzindana Umanyana is chair of the board. She says accreditation is a big milestone. The college can now develop its own programs without needing to partner with other post-secondary institutions. Umanyana also says Northerners will have more access to post-secondary education closer to home. Education Minister Caitlin Cleveland and Mayor Rebecca Alty also attended the announcement.
He was completely unaccountable.
Prince Andrew never had somebody say the word no.
The Queen adored him more than anybody else.
This whole story is about the abuse of power.
We've got emails, we've got photographs, we've got witnesses.
Wow. Ordinary people turn a small investment into big bucks.
I'm in it to win it.
Do you think Mummy and Daddy are going to double their money? That's what I thought.
Why, hello.
You want it? I got it.
This is so cool.
Focus, focus, focus.
Here we go.
Oh, imagine how good the TV's gonna look now.
Good God!
This is incredible.
Did you know this?
As if.
Could the pressure be any higher?
Every week, the issues that matter to Canadians.
Cost of living hurts everybody.
Connecting politics to people.
Win, win, win.
We are not going back.
Sundays, join me for Rosemary Barton Live.
It makes sense that they get a larger share, or does it?
Welcome to the Greenbelt.
All of this, just single detached homes?
Yes.
What do we know? I think we can explain.
About that with Andrew Chang. Watch free on CBC Gem.
It's got to come from the heart.
I will cry. You're so together.
How much more connected do you want to be?
See you there.
Guess what? Pinch me. Yes!
The city of Whitehorse says staff are being harassed at its new temporary recycling center. The depot is temporary. Residents are charged a fee to drop off materials. It costs $1 per 90-liter bag or container. Officials say verbal abuse and harassment towards staff has increased since the depot opened this month. They say transitioning to new recycling services is challenging, but they are asking people to treat staff with respect. The city says abusive behavior will not be tolerated. Aggressive people might be asked to leave, or they could be banned from the premises. A Yellowknife man recently had a close encounter with a black bear outside the city. Noni Paulette shared video footage from the 10-minute interaction on social media. He's now sharing his story in hopes it can help others stay safe with wildlife. We got a chance to speak with Noni earlier. Good afternoon, Noni.
Hi there.
First of all, can you tell me where and how did you come across this bear?
Sure. I was on the Big Lakes, so Great Slave Lake. I was about 50 kilometers out of town, and I'd planned to be there for the evening, so I got there around 6 p.m. Took me a little while to find a spot to tie up my boat. The water levels are really low. So yeah, I just decided to go for a little walk and get a lay of the land and go up to a high spot where I could just have a better clear sight of what was around me. And so that's what I did. And I went up to the high spot. It was about 200 feet from the shore. So I just decided to call for moose. I hadn't tested my call or hadn't called for about a year, so I was just calling twice, and yeah, he showed up right away. So he was probably about 50 feet away from me, and so he must have heard the call, and yeah, he was right there, really quick.
What happened during that interaction with that bear?
So at this point, he saw who I was, and I could see him. He charged me maybe at least twice, I would say. And he moved side to side, and at that point I got a better look at him. I can see that he was a mature bear. He wasn't skinny. He was pretty big. And so, I knew at that point that yeah, I just didn't want to be there. But as I mentioned earlier, my rifle, my InReach, my bear spray were all in the boat. So after he charged a few times, I stood my ground, and I yelled at him pretty loudly. He seemed to respond by just slowing down a little bit, but yeah, he just kept coming. So at that point, I decided to try to make my way back down to the boat and back down the shore, but albeit just very slowly. And I think at that point I was very aware and just to remain calm.
Hey!
And
Hey!
and so any time that he did kind of approach really, I guess swiftly or aggressively, then I would just yell at him, and he seemed to respond a little bit, but again he just kept coming. And so at that point, somewhere along there, I had my phone with me, so I just decided to film it. And
did you have any training beforehand on how to conduct yourself in situations like these?
No, I mean, most of my interactions with bears in the bush, it's either they don't really pay you any mind and they don't really, they don't really care, or if they do see you, then they kind of divert their attention elsewhere, and they just kind of, they luckily for me, they just they're usually out of there pretty quickly. The approach is to be loud in bear country, and to stand your ground and to not run away. And I was very conscious to be doing those things.
And just finally, what do you think people can learn from your experience?
Anytime you go into the bush, you have to be prepared, and some of those key things are being, having the right gear, having food, you can make fire, and especially if you're going to go alone, then having a communication device like an InReach. I travel with a rifle and bear spray, first aid kits. Unfortunately, like in this one instance, I had those things, but they just weren't on my body. And I think this whole situation probably wouldn't have escalated to the point that it did had I had the bear spray on me.
Thanks so much for sharing your story.
Take care.
CBC News has learned more than 7,000 hunters in Alberta have applied to join a government program to kill grizzly bears that pose a threat. Support for the program is far from unanimous. Malika Karim has more, but first, a warning that some viewers may find images in this story disturbing.
These scars, a painful reminder of how dangerous grizzlies can be.
We were hunting actually only kind of 25 minutes away from home.
Hunting for elk in the foothills east of the Rockies, Carmelo Silvestro heard something behind him.
When I turned, thought maybe it was elk. No, it was not one, but 4 large grizzlies.
One of those grizzlies mauled Silvestro, and DNA tests have shown that same bear had killed a hunter 3 years ago. The attack came just months after the province announced changes to its grizzly bear management plan, a shift that could allow the threatened species to be hunted by the public for the first time in nearly 2 decades, though only 30 licensed hunters have been chosen to take part.
There's nothing about this that resembles a hunt, actually. They'll have a finite area, a finite amount of time to pursue that bear, and they'll be after a specific animal.
The province says it's addressing the rising number of conflicts with bears, but the plan has critics.
What experience does this person have in dealing with conflict bears, not just the fact that they have a hunting license?
Grizzly bears remain a threatened species in Alberta, despite that 18-year hunting ban. And conservation groups worry the plan won't protect people or bears.
Grizzlies have not seen a huge population increase. In 2021, there were an estimated 800 or 900. In 2010, there were about 700 or 800.
Silvestro says he supports hunting the bear that attacked him.
She's a problem bear. She's got that aggressive behavior. She's killed once. There's, nothing to say that she won't do it again.
But because the bear has already killed, no civilian hunters will be used to track and destroy it. The province says Fish and Wildlife officers will do that on their own. Malika Karim, CBC News, Calgary.
A project aimed at connecting the Arctic coast to southern Canada is getting support from the Nunavut government. Manur Mubarak tells us leaders hope the plan will unlock critical minerals and bolster northern security.
West Kitikmeot Resources Corp is spearheading the Grays Bay project. It signed an MOU with the government of Nunavut last week. It involves creating a deep water port at Grays Bay, allowing mining companies to transport metals like copper and zinc out of the area. Brendan Bell is the CEO of the West Kitikmeot Resources Corp.
Nobody is willing to invest the necessary resources to develop these deposits, to assess their economic viability without the infrastructure in place. It's a bit of a chicken and an egg problem. So we believe that by advancing the infrastructure, companies will recognize that this is being solved and can reinvest in this part of the world.
The port would also be used by the Canadian Navy for docking large ships and fuel resupply. Former Nunavut Senator Dennis Patterson advocated for the project for over a decade.
Our not-so-friendly neighbor, Russia, on the other side of the pole, are bristling with ports, airfields, and military bases. So Canada and really North America has a real interest in monitoring and having a naval base on our Arctic coast. So this project has many benefits.
The project also includes the creation of 2 roads, one linking with a winter road that connects to Yellowknife. The other road would connect to a proposed Slave Geological Province corridor, a 413-kilometer road running from Tibet Lake to the border between NWT and Nunavut. They'd help connect Nunavut to the Canadian highway system, helping bring supplies like food and fuel into Nunavut communities and the NWT, as well as provide mines with transportation infrastructure and resupply. Wayne Gregory is the mayor of Cambridge Bay. He says the project would help with lowering cost of goods.
Because there are no roads going to the south, there's the extra added cost on everything right across the board for just the cost of living and anything that's being imported.
The project is still undergoing a permitting process. The West Kitikmeot Resources Corp hopes an environmental assessment will be completed in 2027, with hopes to start construction in 2030. Manur Mubarak, CBC News, Iqaluit.
Rural and remote First Nations across Canada are struggling to help pregnant women have their babies closer to home. When it comes to miscarriages and infant mortality rates, studies in the last 2 decades show a gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous populations. Karen Pauls went to one community in northern Manitoba to learn what's being done about it.
Look at that face.
Tennille Easter shows off photos and video of her bouncing baby boy who's home with a sniffle on this day.
Oh my gosh, he's smiling.
There's joy now, but 3 years ago, as an 18-year-old living in a northern Manitoba First Nation, Easter had a miscarriage.
And I was bleeding, so I went to the hospital, and then that's where they gave me the bad news. It was very, very hard and traumatizing for me.
Easter's story echoes those of many women living on remote First Nations and the maternal care crisis they face.
Studies show the rates of stillbirths and babies who die in their first week of life is more than 2 times higher for Indigenous communities than the Canadian average. Some of the risk factors include pre-existing medical conditions, young maternal age, and reduced access to prenatal care and good nutrition.
There was really no support for young mothers that were expecting, and as a result of that, there was a lot of bad outcomes.
Most women on remote and rural First Nations are forced to travel to big cities to have their babies. Health officials are working to find solutions. They tried to hire midwives, but they couldn't recruit anyone, so they rolled the funding into 3 doula positions.
When you hear the word doula, they're helpers. They help you, and they help you through one of the most vulnerable times of your life.
The doulas help pregnant women with grocery shopping and cooking. They provide mentorship, education, and traditional activities, like creating a birthing bundle that includes a baby ribbon skirt and moss bag.
We find the classes are very successful, and people come back because they get that sense of they're welcome, they're safe, and they can share.
I think my favorite one is this one.
Easter says she was nervous about her second pregnancy and grateful Fisher was there to help her through it.
Evelyn really got me out of the house, got me to do walking. Yeah, and I had fun at those classes. It really made me feel good about myself.
Researchers say physician shortages and the closure of hospitals have created a maternity care crisis that could be solved by offering more services on First Nations.
Bring it back to your community. Bring it back to, I don't know, the nursing station. Bring it back to your home. Build a birthing center.
Indigenous Services Canada says 85 First Nations are receiving funding for midwifery initiatives, but ISC acknowledges the need for more training programs tailored to the needs of the communities.
Oh my gosh, look at his hair. I tell you, he's like the sweetest baby ever.
So more pregnant women can receive culturally appropriate and safe care, and more babies can be born closer to home. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Opaskwayak Cree Nation, Manitoba.
Former broadcaster Joanna Awa received the King Charles III Coronation Medal last week. Awa was recognized for her work in public broadcasting and for connecting Inuit with communities around the world. She, along with many other Inuits, received their medals during a ceremony in Quebec City. Awa says she was in disbelief.
Felt like a dream, and I guess now I know how a lot of people, when they receive something, it was like a dream, and it was the same thing. But I never thought in my entire life at all that there would be such. I would be given a medal for advocating the Inuktitut language on air in both television and radio for many years, and basically suffering through it.
As part of the wider program, Governor General Mary Simon had 100 medals to honor outstanding Canadians with. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, head to cbc.ca/north. Our colleagues in Nunavut recently took part in a clam dig. We'll leave you tonight with a look at what they found. I'm Joseph Ho. Thank you for watching. Good night from Whitehorse.